Hi, here we are. Hoping everybody can see and hear me. Could you sort of let me know if you can? I have my producer's here, and he's going to be reading what you send in and getting it off to me. So if you right now, if anybody's having difficulty hearing or seeing me, could you let us know? And we'll be messing around for a couple of seconds while we do that. While you do that. I think by the way, welcome. Welcome to all of you. This is my first international meeting. I shouldn't say I've had some students before from internationals, from England and other places, Brazil. But this is really going to be a treat for me as much as for you guys. I wonder if you don't mind, if you do write something down, if you don't mind doing it, just say where you're from. Be most interesting, most amusing for me.
We already have Ireland.
And we already have Ireland, I'm told. Okay, there we go. Let me just tell you what I'm going to try to do. I have I've sort of enlisted myself to at least basically try to work out a picture for you of what our basic approach to painting is. But all I want to talk to you about is
Western Australia.
Oh, Western Australia. That's coming in loud. That's very good. Thank you, Scotland. You guys are midnight over there. Well, you got used to it last night with New Year's, right? So what I'm going to do, so the format is I have a whole lot of pictures I can use, and I want you to be able to interact with me and put questions out.
I didn't put your microphone further away from your mouth. So it's kind of creeping. I can't fix it.
Okay.
Just another button down.
All right. All right. I'm having to move my, my lapel mic. All right. Wow. Usually the beard is scraping it. This is a different one. Is that working for you?
Yeah.
Mr. Producer? All right. So what I want to do is be able to interact with you. You guys have seen, probably most of you have seen any number of these videos that I've done. You know that my basic objective in all this is to present this way of working. Now I say this because it's literally my way of working, but it is so heavily Boston School oriented, and very much what I've been saying is that I don't want to steal people's glory by saying painterly way of approaching, but it is a painterly way. It's not a draftsman into painting way. It's a direct hit at, the color of the drawing, all that stuff simultaneously. So you know what that is, and it winds up being this has a little bit more painterly look frequently. So people use that term. I don't use it. I don't use terms like that in terms of bragging or anything like that. I think you know that, but it isn't even. Some of you guys have told me that there's many ways of working out there, and they're so true that that's the case. And we have a long hundreds of year history, and more than that, of course, with men from Greece and other places. So, but just so you know, I'm just trying to. Well, all I can be an expert at is what I do. Okay, so I'm trying to get across to those of you, especially who are really working this out and seeing the value of what we're doing. I'm just trying to get, give you a chance to dig in more and to put some very, very specific questions in front of me as you see me go along, or I can stop everything I'm doing and just talk about points. We can do whatever's necessary. I think what I talk about is going to bring up things that you've thought about, and that's what I'm really hoping for. So while my presentation isn't going to be random, it's just going to be showing some images, some of my work, some of my starts, some of which you've seen, and some of my more finished things, and then, and of course, simultaneously, other ones, showing things like Velázquez a little tiny bit, and Sargent a little bit, and stuff like that. So Boston School to keep us going. So yeah. So let me see. So the one thing I really want to clarify to you, and I call this the visually organized impressionistic lay-in. As I get to the pictures, that really is my, my selling point. That's my target tonight, is to get you to understand what it means, what the difference is between a picture that's made out of, your own figures and pieces manufactured together. I think I'm turning cold in my studio here. Excuse me. What I'm trying to do is get you differentiate for you a bit what we're talking about. When we say impressionism, we mean painting literally the color relations of things in front of you and not the facts of things in front of you. So later on in some of the images, when I show you Hands by Bouguereau or Hands by Ang, you'll see that every finger is drawn. When you see Hands by Velasquez or Boston School painting, you'll see the visual order, and some significant parts of fingers will have disappeared and that sort of thing. But the visual idea of painting visually, it means literally that innocent eye thing where you're just painting color relations, meaning color values, right? Value relations, color relations, where they are on the page and what happens where they meet. And if there are any value movements, that is, say, moving from darker to lighter, that's a function of stuff that goes on. But this is our world, right? Now, our world is obviously shape and things like that too. But it's not we don't think of the shape of the X, meaning of the person, that sort of thing, because we found you can actually have more authenticity, more truth, by not knowing actually what it is. That takes some suspended disbelief, for lack of a better word. Hope you don't mind that I'm going to sip a little coffee from time to time. I'm dry tonight, and coffee's probably making it worse. Anyway, welcome to all of you. What are our numbers at, Mr. Producer? Are we at 40 people or so? Okay. It was really nice to see all you standing there. So patiently waiting in line, liking without seeing, right? Well, here we're going to go right to the visuals, okay? If Mr. Producer is ready.
Make your thing into a full screen.
Oh yeah. Do whatever you like. I'm at your mercy. I love what Whitaker can do with his visual stuff, and a lot of it's new to him. By the way, I want to say this whole thing is new to us, so we're going to be changing and shifting and working with, like in the wind, working with going with the flow, including what is happening with your notes as you talk to us. So let me not talk the day away. Because I want to say things, and then I want you to be able to respond. And as we go along, please do send things apropos of whatever we're talking about, or have things going already, not long things, by the way. We won't have time to read long things, but simple statements. Try to keep them clear in your mind, and so that you can, so that I can get them, sort of pick them up quickly.
I have maybe one for you.
You got one already? Yeah.
Sure. Well, you need to present that when you can. There you go. Just these two from this.
Ah, good.
Can you read it?
Yeah. Hello, guys. Oh, you guys are all friends. This is great to see you all. Yeah, Faye. Yeah, hi. Yeah, from England. Yep. I see Liz from. Yep. Jocko.
Yeah, that's what.
Can your method remediate classical realism and the photocopying new realism movement? Jocko, did you go through that? I guess you did. We all did. I mean, that's the way I was trained. Gamble, as much as he talked about the Boston School and this, the visual painting that you see in people like Zorn and Sargent and Soroya and the Boston School guys. As much as you saw that, we didn't do any of that stuff. We worked from outlines, we masked, then we filled in the masses of the shapes of the objects and all that sort of thing. I've showed you that before, so. But the answer is, all those guys, a number of those guys actually had to remediate themselves. I would say that in the case of each one of them, though, they had a sort of a little bit of that influence. It was already there in the training they got. And I'm talking about, say, an Otto Grundmann, he obviously was that kind of painter, so it wasn't like those guys were running that far. But there's an indication from both Benson and de Camp that they actually had to jump, that they had to struggle for this. And I say that because there was everybody, whether you were beginning to get this or not, they weren't right there in the middle of it. They were at the cutting edge, right? So they had to work their way out of the very basic stuff. If you saw the drawings, the basic stuff of the academic world, if you saw the drawings done at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, you would not say for a second that they were impressionistic. They are not like the drawings I'm going to show you a little later. They're not started that way. So that was what they were then having to resist. And I believe in both cases, I wish I could remember the words, in both cases, they actually will say what a struggle it was. And then again, you got DeCamp saying, and you've heard me say this, but you got DeCamp saying, of course, you have to learn to do it this way first. You know, it all starts here, and I think what he was really saying is much like Alfred Stevens says, a man who painted a mustache with a single stroke of the brush must have first studied the mustache one hair at a time. And I think what he's really, in both cases, what they're really saying is there's this need to be a sincere student, just paint exactly what you see, and truly be a disciplined soul, right? What happens when painterly painting shows up is that everybody starts becoming a stylist. And I mentioned de Laszlo last week, and I didn't mean to be disparaging, but he's so much more of a copy of Sargent than he is Sargent because he lacks a background, right, of sorts. And so that's very hard. And I found it difficult even teaching students to want to take them directly. I've done it a number of times, and with mixed success, taking them directly through this, rather than, you know, pausing at the water, you know, well, getting a drink of the academic. So that was a long answer to a very interesting question. But I welcome you into this world because there's, what I found at this end of my life is like I've never had more freedom to do all the things that each one of you love. By the way, I'm not this guy. I've never been a follower of any. I never wanted to be an impressionist or this or that or any style. Never have. I just looked at all the great paintings and I said, I gotta have that, you know. Some case this, some case that, but it was all this bigger package, right? And so if you know that, I think we're all on that same page. If we agree that we're on that same page, then this should actually be pretty. I should say that you'll have to go through the same things that other people went through. I lost my track there. All right. Did you have another question for me there before I go further?
52 viewers, and could you just switch into present?
Oh, okay. I'm not in the present mode yet. Here we go, guys. So we have 52 viewers. This is pretty exciting, guys. Out of our couple thousand subscribers, it's really, really a delight to have you. And from far and wide. One of you, somebody said they were from, they said it would be, I think, 4 in the morning. So congratulations. I hope your clock, you either stayed up or your alarm clock went off for you.
We've got Sydney, Australia.
Sydney, Australia.
New Hampshire.
Well, New Hampshire, wait a minute. That's a treat.
Liz and Rodrigo say hi from New York.
Hi, Liz. I was thinking about inviting you guys up. We'll have to do this one of these days. Rodrigo, nice to hear from you guys. Very good, yeah. Virginia, yeah, but I think you take the cake there in Australia. I think that's you're almost to China. You know, was that 10 hours away from here? It must be at least that. All right, so you have a picture up there in front of you now, I do believe. Would I be right, Mr. Producer? Do they have that picture? No. All right, they do now. All right. The reason I'm showing you this is just simply to it's a cast drawing, but you see what happens is you put a cast drawing in the light like this. And you see, if you're in my world, you suddenly become an interpreter of light. It becomes, in fact, more than an interpreter of light, you become it's your vehicle. It's your vehicle to shape and form and interplay of spots and all those things that make up the visual magic. So what I'm showing you this for is you can see how complex this picture is. Fairly simple in color, right? You can see a few sort of on the beigey side of notes in the mid values there, in these greener, cooler, greener kinds of notes in the background. Not very complex in color. It's much more limited, relatively speaking. But it's enormously complex anyway. Just saying that given that is still enormously complex. And what do you do when and why do you do what you do? So that whole idea of visual order, the reason I even talk about it is because you've got to sort this out. If you have somebody was asking me in sort of disbelief, I think, and there's a couple different people among you asked me, is this good for complicated pictures? And well, I will show you later on that interior that I did, and I didn't. And that person said you must do drawings of everything and all that sort of stuff, and get it all figured out. Well, that would be the more academic approach. But the answer to that is we can actually do more complex pictures more accurately than using that approach. And how I mean accurate is something you'll have to work with as we go along. You have to think about that. And I do mean accurate. I don't mean inaccurate. I don't mean we're going to get away with something here. But the key to it all, and the reason I even talk to you about all these things, the key to it all is visual order. It's actually knowing what to do first. I remember there was an expression I heard from Baudry, the painter, and somebody said about him that he understood the importance of the significant line. So there's a line that's more important than other lines. Well, how about we talk about the significant, pure and simple? And that's why and you really have to get this in your head. How thoroughly can you blur your eyes down? So if you look at the image we're looking at now, and close one eye, first of all, and then just start letting the image get darker, you'll see it'll finally get down to a spot where there's almost only 3 values. The whole background will tend to take on 1 value. And then right in the middle, you'll see a serious dark and a white, rather side by side, making what you might as well think of as a center of interest, because the height of that contrast makes it the most interesting thing in there. But if you understand that, you understand what is the most significant part of this painting. And the placement of that thing, for example, you can manage that, and as long as you don't sit in there and start worrying about what it is. But we're talking about, say, if you look at the upper part of the neck, and I guess at this point I'm going to try to show my brilliant skills at getting a color smear thing going on here. Look at this, guys. Is that showing up well? Am I looking like a genius yet? There we go. If I can make it brighter. Anyway, you can see it a little bit, I think. So what I'm showing you, say, is this right here. You see that high contrast thing? Now, I'm not going to take you away from this. This is hugely high contrast. Now, keep your eyes blurred as you look at this with me. You'll see that these things, if you blur down enough, these things are inconsequential. When I say these things, I mean these contrasts are inconsequential. They'll go away. This one won't go away, and this one won't go away, and other ones. See how this gets weak over here, doesn't it? This top one tends to be pretty important right here. And then there's a few others in different places, gradually going down the scale to the less important. And by the time you get to certain places in here, you don't want to know about feet. You want to know that here you don't have to talk. And in our way of laying in pictures, you're going to see, as I walk through this whole thing, you're going to see that passages like this, you have to be very good at not saying much, not losing time there. Remember, I talk about the neural energy thing, so that you put in your best energy into placing these strong players. Let's just say you're using a square to put it on. I think this is a square. We use this for Instagram or something. And so let's take a square like that, and you have to learn to place things. This isn't in center. This isn't in center, but these kinds of things begin to show you locations left and right, these kinds of things. Other ones are useful for setting up a top and the bottom. Now, this is a place where you have a weak place, but you'll need a bottom, so you'll want to use that one. But you begin to use these as you set up on your visual ensemble in a frame. By the way, put forth questions as we go along here. I'll pick them up as we go, or discussion points. Anything you want to just throw out there. Just short, as short as possible. All right. Now, I'm going to show you a demonstration here. Now, this is not the image I copied from. I copied from an image, and I wish I had it with me, of this Vermeer done by a student, a graduate student of the Museum of Fine Arts. And so I was demonstrating from that copy that we had in our studio. I'm demonstrating how the visual order works. Now, Paxton, there's no indication that Vermeer worked in the visual order. But when I say worked in the visual order, it doesn't mean his pictures weren't visually organized. But in the visual order literally means what you do first, second, and third. Now, the image I had, the contrast, see on the back of that chair, this contrast right here, this is huge, right? So setting up this, placing this thing well, this point literally right here, getting this exit well situated. And by the way, my thing here is purely a demonstration. I didn't use a shape that was the same or anything like that, so don't confuse that part. But I still have this problem, which when you don't do that, all sorts of things like exit, they begin to be talking points, but you don't get to work them out very well. Anyway, but you can see that in this picture over here, you can see this chair will have to be doing some really serious work for us, right? We'll have to be using this as an organizing point. And any other things that read well, they're going to be our organizing points, okay? And so then what you have to get good at is what Sargent calls points and angles. But so once you're making these points as an organizational point, you got these at the right angle to each other. This one here, almost exiting the picture there, is more nearly horizontal with that. And of course, remember, horizontal is not anywhere near as much use to you as vertical is, because you can plumb verticals. Horizontals, you get tricked all the time because of perspective. High horizontals aren't horizontals, low horizontals aren't horizontals, unless you're looking straight down at the plane. They'll be tilted one way or the other. So, but you can see that the idea of this exit and where it lands in relation to this this here, wherever it lands in relation, say, you can see that I'm working on trying to get a locator at the back of the hair here, or top of the hair. I don't know what I've got going on there. Now, what I want to show you before that, by the way, is what the Boston School does to paint wet into wet. You actually have to have color notes sitting in front of you, and I've told you all this before. So remember, I know I'm going through this stuff just to talk about stuff, but I'm going through it so you can pull me up and say, right here, I've never understood what you meant. Okay, that's really important. I want you to say that to yourself and put that query out there. Okay. But so we're spotting major colors. What we want to find out is whether our palette will do this, and how we'll have to adjust. What I mean do this is I mean what it'll take to make this set of color relations do the same thing his painting is doing. We have a leg up on the world of nature because we know he did it in paint, and therefore we should be able to match today anything he could put in front of us. But we're still not literally matching this here to this here. What we're doing is we're getting this to this, or whatever sets we have there in front of us. We're getting them to be right in terms of each other. Keep remembering this is not the picture I worked from. This is a really bad reproduction, the best I could find. So now here's something where you can see how I investigated. This is done a bunch of years ago, but I was investigating for my own amusement Sargent's use of this technology. And because, especially based on that idea of his points and angles thing. And so I went through, here's the image that I'm using, this one right here. And I went through this image. I said, that isolates fairly nicely. I can just go through that and try to see if I can hit notes. And again, this is not the same image. This was actually out of a book, and I don't much recommend that. But for this purpose, it's actually pretty useful, to sort of see visual order. As long as the images aren't hyper contrasty. It's just what we're doing today with our cameras and stuff. It's amazing. You can't take a shot of a picture the way it looks anymore. It just zooms in, like every part of it is more, more edgy. All the lines show up much more strongly, every little contrast. So it's a bit of a difficulty. But what I was after here was the visual order of the edges, and I was trying to see how important it was and how much he relied on it. And so I was finding large areas where he didn't do much initially. Here I'd be showing you that, where we wouldn't be working on much of this, but we'd be working hard at nailing the location, say, of this, or a bend in the whatever, or this thing here in particular. That was one of the keystones, right that little area right there. And again, the values of the reproduction in the book, I doubt that this picture is very far off, so the reproductions here would make it look like I couldn't hit a note, but you'll see how that works as you make copies and try to reproduce them. At any rate, you can see how effective this was, and what I was trying to do was get the light effect, say here, right to the light effect here, and using sharp angles with points on them for placement of things, wherever that showed up. And then using even things like the light here. Do you see this one right here in the clouds? So I was articulating those points for use. You see that? That's what's going on here. So that one right down there. So you see how that's what the kind of stuff you're trying to take that thing into consideration and get the angle right to this, or the angle right to this, and the distances right to all these different things. You see how different that game is, though? If you just know it's color spots, and you get them to do what they do by contrast in an area and color relations to the whole and all that sort of thing, it just becomes a question of can you get them in the right place in relation to each other. So here you're seeing Sargent and DeCamp both.
Is this a good time to pause?
This is a great time for question. Absolutely, sure.
All right. I think these four.
I got 4 questions lined up. This is what I'm looking for. Excellent.
You can read them or not read them, whatever, but those 4, I think, are good.
Yeah, Cole, that's really great. The Florence Academy, all these people, they're our friends, some of whom aggravate us more than others. But they're all, this world where everybody's been trying to figure this out. I'm sorry, I'm looking up at the image of myself instead of looking at you guys. Sorry, I'm being yelled at. So nice to meet you. Nice, all you guys. Spain, Florence, great stuff. Oh, you're from Cape Cod. Cool. Yeah. I'm really interested in all these names. You're born in an area of America, and you actually think everybody's got an English name or a Norwegian name or something, maybe 3 different countries. It's just great seeing all these great names. I could just try to guess where the heck you are all coming from. It's just great. All right, Paul, I'd like to ask you whether you have any advice how to approach experimenting with mark making in oil paints. I struggle with finding variety and maintaining harmony in the overall image. Yeah, mark making. Yeah, let's see if that comes up as we go along. But the way I think of mark making is, I think of it as you see, nature drives everything, and you're just trying to be effective. But one of the things I found is, for example, when I was young, I would see some of these marks done by Tarbell and be these parallel marks. And again, I use that word hack, hack, hack. I was so put off by it. And as I was painting along there, I was getting glare on my canvas. So at one point, then questioned Gamble about that. I never even noticed a thing like that, I don't think, at the Art Students League. Now, I'd probably be underestimating my own and the other students around me prowess or even the conversation of teachers. But I remember that one of the points was being made was that you had to figure out some way to make your marks in such a way that when the light comes in, it doesn't produce glare on your canvas. And so that has to do with two things. One is how much paint you use, but it's just as much the angle of incidence. So if your light's coming in like this and your mark's going like this, you're going to have ridges on it, each of which is going to pick up light. And it will affect the values. And in a dark area, it'll make the values look like light. It'll look like this form in the shadows, and you don't want that. Or say in the shadows, if it's in the shadow area. So, but I like the conversation of Ang, who says it's just the right amount of paint. But really, that's really one of the key things. If you don't put enough paint on, you won't get a color. Now, if you put too much on, you get ridges like crazy. So you want to put the right amount of paint on. And I would say beyond, so Ang can be cute and say, well, it's the house painter, he's using just the right amount of paint. It's really just the amount that'll cover without wasting paint, right? But if you want to say it, just what I'm going to tell you is let nature drive it. Let nature drive everything I tell you. Just watch what's in front of you and make your marks in a way that works with that enables that to work. And there will be enough different ways for you to do it. But the main thing I find, though, is that you have to use enough paint, and you have to make sure your paint is viscous and flowing enough, so that and it has to be thin enough paint, so that not thin in the watery sense, but it has to be spread out so it's not thick, so that you can easily mix the next color into it and adjust on the canvas. That's probably not as much as you want, but you can follow up, okay, if I didn't answer it precisely. And that was to, oops, did that move down the screen?
Yeah, I think that was to Ganbaru. Can you, here, I'll show you which one's next.
Yeah. Good old hands of producers. This is our technology, and other people can do this by using it in multiple screens. Yeah, that was the Ganbaru. Making marks, yes, or finding variety. Okay, so I didn't answer that question about variety, though. So Gamble, at one point I said, what are the best way to make marks? And he says, just use variety in the marks. He used the expression weaving, which I've never forgotten. Right? So you make a mark this way the first time, the second mark is going to go a different way, and the third mark may, as long as you stay with the light, so these marks can all be all sorts of directions as long as you don't get them to go this way when the light's going that way. But that's called weaving, and try that. You'll find that very satisfying. And by the way, I was working for a restorer at the time, and I found this little it wasn't the second, it was a pretty nice painting, but not a top-level painting. I was just admiring the beauty of the paint that way, the way he wove those things. After I'd heard about that, I saw it done by somebody. And so that's where Degas says you can learn something from anyone. So that's a good example, yeah. And Jocko says, if employing your method, you can copy a master painting not done in my method. Can you improve the light impression or sprinkle some Tarbell and Benson into it? Boy, now listen here. That's in the class, though, Jocko, of what I think of as trying to make art. And I was laughing. I mean, I was almost laughing hysterically or irritatedly at one of my friends who is a really good painter, and a much better painter than the person I first found doing this. But he started adding in lens flare to his paintings because he thought it looked cool or something, or maybe somebody who, I don't know what he did it for. But look, those kinds of things I don't find to be quite the stuff of great art, And what we're talking about now is actually find your poetry in nature itself. if you're using Benson or Tarbell because they enable you to make the truth more powerfully or to express the beauty of what you see more powerfully, and of course you'd use that. But yeah, that would be probably the maximum of what I would say about that. I wouldn't improve on anybody. When you're copying, you're trying to learn what they did. You're trying to learn their palette. You're trying to even learn what paints were like in those days. So you have some underlying knowledge of what the difference is now. But yeah, that's. But I do think that's the biggest temptation that comes to us as painters, and that is that temptation to do art instead of to do beauty, and I'd say and to power truth. And that connection, like in the sciences I've mentioned before, between truth and beauty is so impressive, so always there. And I would just say stay humbly in that search, because you're going to find a beauty that only you can ever see. It's almost like you're given your own eyes like nobody else's, with your whole body of experience and cultures and all those sorts of things. So yeah, watch out. Just watch out for that one,
Liz?
Liz.
No, but before you go on, Ganbaru is actually Jocelyn.
Oh, Jocelyn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's some pretty nasty names on some of these in the past that I've tried to avoid using. So I know that, I sense that, but yeah. So good, Jocelyn, I'll try to remember that.
You see Liz there?
Yeah, I see Liz. Hi. Trouble covering my canvas without losing the visual order on larger works. It can take me almost a week sometimes to cover the canvas, cover the white with proper consideration. Yeah, you're talking about one of the major difficulties for us in the impressionist game, Liz. And that is, so you're trying to do a complex picture or a large picture, and your aim is to cover it while it's all still wet. Right? So some of my students go to those dodges of using clove oil or getting the thing wrapped and have clove oil in it so it stay so wet a couple days. And I've never tried that because I've never found I need it. I don't know if you all saw the one I was showing. I don't have it here on the screen tonight, but that just came out recently. It's 46 by 48 inches, a painting that big. And I think I did take a day and a half to lay it in. But the difficulty, the trick, is to know how to keep blurring your eyes and know where you have to cover and not do many things, right? That's, again, it gets you right back to the whole idea of the visual order. The visual order is there to deliver you a start that covers the canvas in that single day. And I used to tell myself, I'd say, Paul, cover this canvas in 2 hours. Well, we were told to cover it in a half hour, but that just makes a mud puddle, so don't even think that way. But I'd say to myself, cover it in 2 hours, Paul. And what has happened is unimportant things started falling away. And unity started showing itself. I started seeing things that would hang together. And that's where, remember, I talked just a little bit ago about Sargent and your paintings have 3 or 5 values. They only have 3 or 5 values if you know how to blur your eyes and see what those major masses are. And then we also know that in low contrast areas, those things aren't going to die over time like a high contrast or a white painted over a dark that's dry. That's going to come back and haunt you because whites in particular that don't have much color in them will go more transparent with age. And so that's the only thing you really have to be aware of. So in the meantime, if I have a mass, well, you could be looking at the picture we have up there right now. You see the tree mass up there. These things are probably largely just marks, but he made sure he knew what this mark was and what this mark was and got that value movement. And he's probably just using broken color in exactly the way that Monet would do it, and getting this generally covered, not trying to find the exact locations of all the little openings in the trees or anything like that. But you have to know how to do that and how to own this thing as a unity and know how to produce the great form of it, but don't get involved in drawing little things like arms that are at low contrast, okay? Because you can reproduce these anytime. You can build these into that basic value anytime. I'm hoping that do you have more for me there, Mr. Producer?
Do you see the Jack one?
Can I just slide this up with my finger?
Yeah.
This is
If not, I'll point it out specifically.
Jack Daly?
Yeah.
How would you recommend practicing if you're unable to study? Hi, Jack, by the way, thank you for all your comments. How would you recommend practicing if you're unable to study art full-time with somebody? Boy, that's an important question. I think probably the most important thing to say to somebody like that is just make sure you do it several hours, if you can, 2 or 3 hours a day anyway. What you do with that, There are different things you can do. I mean, I do see, for example, that Sergeant Degas, any number of other people were found in museums standing back away from a picture and just copying the major masses, trying to understand composition. Those sorts of things you can definitely always work on. Visual order, as I mentioned before, you can work on that. You can make a copy of one of these Boston School type paintings, either of these two I'm showing you right now, and just blur the heck out of your eyes and see if you can actually get these these value effects just as they are in person. I just get these contrasts, I say value effects, get these contrasts and unities by using your blurred eye. And by doing so, by the way, as I talk about points, like you make a point, see on that leg over on that right one, as you make a point there and you try to get you can practice getting good at lining up points. And this is the stuff, hitting notes, getting value relationships right, et cetera, et cetera. But ask it further, would you? Would you push that question a little bit beyond that?
Doing this last one here, I'll find it for you.
I think you're also probably asking me about what to do with your time with nobody correcting you or anything like that. I've been trying to sort that out myself. It's one of the more difficult things. I've noticed even when I shoot images of something I've painted side by side with what I'm working on, how false it is. Let me think more about that. And other people have asked that. I probably need to do something online, literally, to talk to you about that. So if you'll let me go to another video and bring that up, I'd be very pleased to do it for you, Jack. I wonder how many. I'd love to see a raised show of hands of how many people are struggling with exactly that same thing. The one thing you don't want to do, though, is put it off till you're older. I mean, the strength of your youth, the younger you are, the better from the point of view of just having a period of time when you can produce good work after you've gained your skills. The other thing I can suggest is that you do keep reading some of these people like Degas and other people. Some of them weren't able to study early, Puvis. You might see if there's anything in their biographies that is helpful. But let me plan to make a note of that I'm going to talk about the some best practices and things you can do. If you look at Anson Cross's books, Drawing and Painting Self-Taught, there's some stuff in there that's useful, and that's highly recommended. There's 3 books by him, Light and Shade, Drawing and Painting Self-Taught, and I think the other one's called Freehand Drawing. There may be a 4th one, but they were done for high school kids, I believe, and extremely effective and are mentioned by Sargent and others in a series of like 70 different good painters in the Boston area and in the U.S. were recommending his methodologies. But just that idea of drawing and painting self-taught, that begins to get you something, because these were schools, classrooms, they don't have the same capacity, ability to do what I do in an atelier, in a one-on-one relationship. Also, I'm trying to sort out some way of figuring out how to get people to be able to be in vicinity who don't have tons of money and support, so that we can help. But that's a larger problem. And if anybody else has connections like crazy who really care about these arts, can recognize the value, I'd love to have more meetings. I'm looking for scholarship dollars. And more opportunity to give this to more people. So, all right, that's saying too much about it. I mean, but anything you want, though, I really mustn't limit myself at all. Ken Manami, Ken, how are you? Man, it was so nice to see you a couple of years ago for those. Ken actually showed up for the out of Chicago for the one of the videos I did on the evolution of Impressionism, and I don't remember which one it was, but that was a big surprise and a very pleasant one at that. Ken studied with me back in when we were in the Framingham area. Ken, would you say that there's a hierarchy to form as it relates to the visual order? Paint the largest forms first and then proceed to the smaller ones. Yes, of course there is. Yeah, you know that, right? Like the bumpy squash in your teapot painting. That was that lesson, actually. That was one where I had to actually present that to myself, like almost like you get a math problem by a teacher says, here, you have to solve this. You ain't getting out of this class without solving this. And as I said, my teapot painting was my graduation piece. So I thought of all the difficulties you could have in painting. And that was one that you play with these things and don't necessarily take it all seriously until you realize you're not going to get a passing grade. And I was trying to sort of get out of realism and get into, something, to keep pushing in a direction I was already moving in. But I felt I had to solidify that. So that painting was done post-Gamel as my statement to Gamel is if he were to come back from the dead and look down on me, he would say, "You graduated." He would say that to some guys anyway, just to get you out of his place, but that's another story. Ken, but yeah, so when you're looking at this painting here, and you're seeing in both cases like major mass of the dress, the major masses of the clouds. You see virtually no effort to make the clouds in the Sargent painting. They're just a mass. They're a color movement. They have some shapeness because that's the strong thing they have. The dominance of form, like in the arm of the girl on the with the hanging down arm or the head by De Camp, either of those heads, you can see the significance of that big form is, yes, it's always on there first. And you're not going to go looking into that. If you get stuck not covering your canvas in those 2 hours, it's without the eyes that you're in better shape than with the eyes and without the form of the head. So absolutely, great, huge question. And otherwise, you're working piecemeal from one little piece to the next little piece, and then you're hoping your form is coming out with it. And that's pretty not it, right? I think I'll find it somewhere not very far hence where you can see that. Let me go past this one for now. Yeah, let me go past this. I'm going to try to come back to this as questions want me to. This one, by the way, shows you, this is me working on the bottom. This is a very tiny study. This is Tarbell, undoubtedly a big one. I think this is probably a 30-plus inch picture. And this one, I guess, is also not particularly big. But this is the Meldrum painting, Max Meldrum, where you can see that we're all after roughly the same things. The value relationships to being really good, the great unity of major masses, and then the effects, the power of the effects, the order of the effects, the order of the silhouettes in their contrasts. And you see that. I'm showing you that one. I'm showing you this one now. You see the contrasts here and here. And we're all working on those things. These are primary table setters for us. Keep that word in mind, by the way, idea of table setting. So you have a contrast like this. He might have been using a little bit of something down here or something here, but he's got these players and they're always being used. There's a very significant one. They're always being used as table setters because it really matters what the visual order of the effects is, okay? And we're talking about the value contrast. It also matters literally what the value is of this to this before you even start talking about that, okay? Which is where you start setting up your colors. And that delivers light so beautifully. Did you say you had another question for me?
Elizabeth Higgins asks, can you repeat the name of the book about drawing what you see?
About drawing what you see. Do you mean the Anson Cross one? I think she means that, the one I just mentioned. So that's my question to you. If you don't mean that, if you mean from a different book, let me know. But yes, the answer is Anson Cross. And I think it's one of my more recent videos too. I just talked about him. I didn't show the books this time, but Anson Cross is the guy's name, A-N-S-O-N, Cross. And the 3 books, and they can be found, are charcoal drawing, drawing and painting self-taught, and freehand drawing. And I think he's got one in isolation on perspective, but all of them have these games with perspective and other devices that you can use to correct your eye that way. Testimonials is the word I was trying to think of. Sargent, Joseph De Camp, Tarbell, they all had testimonials in the back of, I think it was in charcoal drawing in that book. And by the way, let's look at this picture here with that form question of Ken's. You see how beautifully these larger forms are working, and yet there's a lot of stuff happening inside them. Look how beautifully the big forms are here. Well, so it's always in that order. If you don't get the major forms, well, the major forms are functions. The values are functions of the greater values, right? So this value has to be right to this value. So you always have to work with big things first. But when you're talking about form, the movement of a form and the movement of another form, they also have to be working relatively right in relation to each other. So if you're busy making 5 and 10 little things in here, again, neural energy, you'll run out of, number one, time. Your hours will go down. You won't be able to cover the canvas. And then you'll run out of neural energy, and you won't have the energy at the very end to try to pull it all together. It won't work out for you that way. Do we have any more questions right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how much of they apply, and I'm much happier. I'm very happy to talk just about your points on these things. I can go through these slides because I know what I'm really interested in. By the way, for me tonight, is to make sure I clarify more of what I'm doing, and that's why I like that Ken question or the other questions too. But
Liz, right in the middle. There's another one.
yeah, Liz, this is where I like it. By the way, that you guys can keep coming at me. Elizabeth Higgins, hi. Corey, look at all you guys.
Oh, you already did that. Liz Beard underneath.
No, I know that, but I just wanted to see that these names of people I know or people I've seen. So Liz, yes, how do you control the surface? Do you need to use a heavier weave to have room to add more paint? Now that's a good one, controlling the surface. And the fact is for students, yeah, you need more weave when you're a student. But I have found that pretty much you don't have to be very far advanced to just start using the Clausen's, I think it's number 12, single primed. It's the single primedness that gives it the grain you need. But if you're finding yourself filling it in, now first of all, you're probably not working all over the place at once. You're probably working too long in one place. You might think about that. The second thing is you're probably using paint that isn't thinned enough. And I'm looking over at the wrong screen again. You're looking at the you're not using a paint that's thinned down so it's flowing. Remember, I want paint to be to move, but I don't want it to be wet. I don't want it to be oily. You don't want oily paint. That's a terrible thing to paint in. And you don't want it to be dry and stiff. You want it to move nicely so you can draw beautiful, luscious, wet edges with it, right? With a bristle brush. And mostly what that boils down to is using, especially if you're using like a Winsor Newton or a Rembrandt, just use those straight up except for the white. And make sure you mix whatever white you use, mix it down so that it's the most beautiful, buttery thing you've ever used in your life. Yeah, and then be all over the place in your canvas at once. But yeah, that's a good question because that's when you screw up and you have to do an edge 3 and 5 and 8 times. By the way, to make you feel any better, I've seen it in Paxton. I've seen their ridges in Paxton, and I'm not talking about when he was young. That blew my mind, to see. So that's one of those reasons you want to look at paintings firsthand if you possibly can. You really can see things like that. And I find the drying time can be a challenge. Yeah, that's because if you're in a hurry and you start getting to the third day and you haven't finished the first day's work, you'll start dealing with tackiness and other things that are really problematical. And again, if you're really dealing with something like that, but again, your point, the point I was making earlier to you was blur the heck out of your eyes and don't draw anything but the majors, the major great masses, the major, by the way, any majors, even big movements of color are majors, right? Great forms, the great movement of form, that's majors. You should make a list of all the things that you need to do. At the end of a painting, you should have done a touch of everything. We talk about everything at once in the start. Everything at once. That doesn't mean every object at once. It means every idea, shape ideas, the major shapes, the major sizes of things, the major proportions have to be good. The visual order of the effects has to be right, the order of the lights, right? Any great movements in value, all the great forms, the set of the forms, right? Do you realize what that, some of you may have never heard that before from me because I can't be sure I've said it. But that's what a good start is, right? So that's when you have to know this little game of lost and found. You have to know how to slur and blur and not think about certain edges because they can't be seen easily, okay? They'll never cause you problems in the finish, okay? And even while you bring them on in the finish, they're not going to cause you problems. And I could probably show you some of mine a little later on in this thing that are like that. So, yeah, I'll try to pick that up as we go along. I'll try to remember that one.
Do you want to read Jack Daly there and then move on?
Yeah.
After that?
Hey, Hyman. Yeah, how are you? Yeah. Jack, I do envy some of the chaps back in the day like Orpin or Sargent who were able to work, my golly, I know, 9 to 10 p.m. in their teens working for mainly live models. Oh, gee. I mean, don't we all, right? I mean, here I am. I'm finally getting to, after the military and all this other stuff, getting drafted, finally getting into a place where I can even study at 23 and finally finding Gamble at 26. In the meantime, having no kind of well-directed practice. These guys had well-directed practice from early on. I mean, but no, everybody has their limitations, right? Everybody has their things to struggle with, the things they have to work their way past. And so we are a class of, today, virtually all of us are truly outliers, right? There are a couple of people whose father or some mother or somebody around them actually had some reasonable training that gave them something to work with. and I know a couple of successful painters today who are like that. And that was not, it's common in basketball and other sports, but we think of ourselves as the outliers. That's why we don't trust talent. We work harder than other people. I like the Larry Bird thing. He says, I've mentioned before, what's an unathletic white man doing excelling in an athletic black man's sport? and it really is one of those things he said, where you just know by his own answers that he just worked longer and harder than anybody he knew. And he heard somebody or other heard, I think it was, if I haven't got the story backwards, he heard that Magic Johnson was working X number of hours more than him, and he doubled his time or did whatever. He just wouldn't be outworked by anybody. But use your brains, use your thoughts. Don't get sucked into little stuff, and don't fall for little cheap tricks. Low hanging fruit isn't what you want. Aim high, and don't settle. Just keep going for the best. Keep looking at great paintings. Keep improving your taste. I keep just struggling to know what it is, and you're going to have to experiment. Everything we do is trial and error, by the way. So yeah, just I know, I feel your pain, but don't be a victim. That's my answer to you. Okay.
Gambaru one, and then maybe the two after that.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is Jocelyn again. I was almost tempted to read that name. Have you read Catherine M. Suslov, Foucault on Painting? I've never heard of that one, so thank you for that information. Foucault probably, or any of his writings on, now you said his, is it Catherine? Have you read Catherine? Is that a guy? Or any of his writings on painting? I'm currently working through the book. I highly recommend, I think I see what you're saying. Okay. I highly recommend Foucault's essay on Las Meninas. I'm looking forward to finding that. Yeah. If you have would you mind emailing, and I'll put that out somewhere on one of my websites. If you can email, we'd like to get more books out there. It was really nice to find out about Max Meldrum and any kind of writing, especially as it relates to the science of appearances and the work of the impression, working the impression. I really want to have it. Thank you for that. Yeah. I've not heard of him. There you are. And am I talking to, I like Mr. Artistical. That's very, very poetic. If you're a figure painter, how do you always paint from life if hiring a model for the length of time it takes to produce a finished painting becomes financially prohibitive to use photographs? When I couldn't afford it, I just didn't. That's one of the reasons I worked still life. Because I wouldn't do that, and I don't recommend it. I recommend against it, actually. Now, I don't recommend against anything when it comes to understanding the science of the visual order and those sorts of things, because you can analyze that through photography. It won't benefit you in the same way at all as working from the third dimension. The interpretation that creates the art we have is the interpretation of the third dimension. And I can't say more about that. That's just profoundly the case. So I don't recommend it. On the other hand, you can also do compositions from photography and stuff like that. So there are ways you can use it. It's just that your basic training, and this is what I really mostly am focused on, talking to people now. Your basic training, the training part, the learning to see, is learning to see nature in front of you, and as Degas would say, interpreting form. That means turning form and making it happen on a flat surface. And that's different from making a flat surface, the modulations on a flat surface that suggest form on another flat surface. That's different, right? So I won't say more, but yeah, keep struggling any which way you can do it. I know, boy, I feel your pain there for sure. The Art Students League, if you guys can find a place like that, if you can find a place you can find a model where people will actually sit there for hours, and you can hire a model and share the expenses, that's really the way to go. And that was the beauty, actually, for me, the Art Students League. That was the beauty, that I was painting figures and portraits all day, all night. I got there when they opened, and I left when they closed. But and I slept on the subway both ways. But that was the huge benefit. I was playing, as John Holt would say about numbers. You want to teach a kid math, let him play with numbers. I was playing with figures. I was playing with the painting. I was exploring painting all on my own because the information level was relatively not much. It was some, and I don't take anything away from the guys who succeeded in their own fields. There's some good painters there, guys I respect, the Lafels and the Greens and others. But yeah, figure out ways. Keep looking forward. You know, if you want to put it in the way I think, pray about it and look for it. You know, expect it to show up. You know, and knowing the figure. By the way, that's the mastery of the figure is mastery of beauty. To me, it's that chief beauty to the human eye. And there's something hugely important about it in terms of just so many things that relate to beauty. I don't know what else to say about it.
The next two are...
Next two, all right. I like your name, Mr. Artistical, though. I remember you, Penn C 0008, University of Minnesota. How are you? Nice to hear from you. When you start, why do you use separate color spots with bare canvas in between instead of starting off? Instead of starting off a light effect. Yeah, because I want more. I just simply want more freedom with color per se, and I just call it giving respect to color. You know, color gets his moment in the sun. It'll never come back. But as soon as I put a color with a color, it's a location, and the location starts taking over. I start worrying about it, or it's a shape, and that starts taking over. That really is the primary reason. Color is so shy. Once drawing starts taking over, and I wouldn't say it's weak, it's just shy. Once drawing takes over, it just stands back and says, well, you guys can have it, I'll see you later. That's what happens to color. So give it its day, give it its due, and put the time in. That's the one thing I truly respect about the Monet model, as you see it many times. Fleck, 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 blob, 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 watching the color, and you begin to see what it's going to take to make this phenomenon in front of you. And then we'll start worrying about where to place things and then finishing up bringing on the effects. But that's a good question. That means you must have been exploring this. I'm really pleased. That's really fun. Elizabeth, yes. Yeah, if I haven't said that clearly enough, you could ask me in an email. And I think my email's everywhere, but for people who haven't seen it, it's Ingbretson_studio. Ingbretson_studio at yahoo.com. And do please send me anything like that. I do have reading lists and other things, so I can give you more clarity about that. Good. Oh, and you're still here with me, 0008. You're better than 008, 008. And how do you set up canvases when painting the visual impression to ensure it looks good where it's intended to be hung? You know, that takes experience. One of the worries about painting it to be hung, you know, if you're painting for a spot and it's going to be mounted to the wall and they're never going to change the color, you're doing pretty good. But even the Sargent murals in Boston, they changed the colors of the walls. And as Gamble would say, they wrecked these murals. And so you can paint for the walls all day, and what's it going to get you? Right? So finally they began to bring back the original colors to those places, and that was really nice to see, the sort of the restorative mentality. But yeah, so somebody who gets this picture, they're going to sell it, and then what walls are going to hang on? That's my biggest worry. So, you know, if you're doing it on a particular wall, the main thing is to use a color scheme that's going to go on that wall, and then keep the unity within itself. Don't worry about that wall anymore. If that wall wants to have low contrast values, you know, then you have to start by using that mentality right from the beginning. But all you have to do is set the table for yourself in the color scheme and in the value scheme, and then you got to make sure you just stay there, right? That's not going to be any old impressionist scene in front of you. You're going to have to, for example, if you want a person sitting in a room, a portrait, say, of that person, and you want them to hang on a beige wall, such as the one I'm looking at right here, you're going to have to hang that cloth. You're going to have to get that cloth in the room near this model and start organizing your color scheme to integrate with that color, okay? But that's the setup, right? And that's where people overlook this. It's not the woman who's the setup. The setup is all these other abstractions before that. So yeah, keep that forever in mind. I don't think any of the pictures I have, I'm going to go through some more pictures just so you can look at them. You can see this is Zorn and by the way, I apologize. I took this offline. I never noticed this glare on that picture there. And so whoever put it on there, that's really nice that you took it, but it's too bad that I didn't notice that. But you can see this guy's working from the visual order. And this is, again, for you, Liz, that mass, that unity of this mass. You have to learn to put virtually nothing in there for some serious period of time while you really work the location and the look of nature in places like this, exits like this. The leading, you see this area over here, deal with the most important ones of these in any area. Even if you see any number of things, don't paint all of them. Paint this one and figure out a way to let that one go. You can see that in my nude later on, how I've done things like that. But you can see that the articulation of key places like this and certain things down here. Again, in my lay-in of my own self-portrait, you see that I've done that. Those are the places to put your energy. Learn how to lose all this stuff. And if you have time, you'll begin to pull up the next ones as you go. What you don't want to get into, though, you want to get into the visual order, so you blur down. If it doesn't show up, you don't paint it, as you're sort of opening your eyes just slightly and coming out of the fog, okay? That is so much the key to this way of working. Visually, it's the order visual, right? It's the order of things as you're coming out of the fog. And that is purely, by the way, a Boston School conversation. That's not academic. They didn't learn that from, I learned that from Gamble, the words, or from the reading. But we did not do that in Gamble Studios. We weren't painting big lost masses, and it took me a long time to figure that out, but I just kept blurring my eye and saying, paint what you see first. It dawns on you, and you begin to get there from that. Same thing with this one. You can see all this stuff here. You would do virtually nothing. You probably wouldn't make this as black as some of this other stuff in that right area there. Or this stuff here, you'd have this warmer, say, than this stuff over here, but you wouldn't be involved in doing stuff in there. It'd be slightly looser. And that's a key too, by the way, when you're doing large areas like this, if they're sort of broken up and stuff, don't go in there and make a solid mass that just intimidates the heck out of you. It's just use a looser set of, not overly mixed marks. Of course, you have to lose the white of the canvas, but just make sure whatever combinations you use there, you don't overmix them. It stays loose, but you get through the area with the larger movements of value or form or whatever it has without losing time there. So you can keep your focus right where you want it, right there, and right down here, and right over, whatever it is. And maybe if there are exits, a few of those. Sometimes you do need exits, even if they're weak. So you'll have to consider that. But make sure by the end of the day, you've nailed these 3 or 4 players. You really nailed it. I don't mean the objects. I mean some key part of these things. So that if you had to come back the next day and paint it, you could have painted that white out and come back and just cut a clean dark into that white the next day. Yeah.
So can a one-eyed man who's colorblind paint in your method?
Are you that guy, Ken? Ken, the one-eyed man who's...
Jocko.
Oh, that's Jocko. Okay. A one-eyed man definitely can do it. I wouldn't recommend the one eye because I think you're going to lose a little something. So even the guy with one eye probably, my dad had one eye, by the way, and I would notice that he would start pouring the coffee, and you'd be terrified because it looked like it was going to hit just on the wrong side of the edge of the cup. It never looked like, he was definitely not in the center of the cup like you'd be if you had 2 eyes. But what you'd sometimes catching him though, turning his head a little bit and picking up depth by moving his head a little bit. Well, that's an important thing to be aware of, the illusion of depth. But so you don't want to be simplistic about it and say, well, if you just use one eye, you'll just it'll be easier, right? Because you'll actually wind up not having something. But it's a thing I call dither. You don't even know what exactly it is and how it's affecting you. But when I colorblind, now that's a different story. Now colorblind for color, it's not going to help you at all. But for visual order painting, I mean, golly, yeah, you've seen the etchings of Zorn. If you're colorblind, that's you, and you love this way of working. Go to the etchings of Zorn. Go to the etchings of or any black and white paintings. Use black and white paint and play this out because you can get the most beautiful, nuanced sense of color with black and white. You can use charcoal. You can use. There's so many beautiful mediums. And so, if you were looking at the drawings, for example, of Lillian Westcott Hale, you'd see some of those exquisite drawings you've seen in your life, and really beautiful, like masterpieces of painting, right, so to speak. Really nuanced value movements, and really excellent. And I'm not talking about academic-looking stuff. I'm talking about the stuff that looks like Boston School thinking. Not worked in a careful, literal way photographically, but much more like what I'm looking at right here, much more in keeping with this idea of the visual order and powering up the strong guys and letting the weak ones go. But I'm making a long question a very easy, short one, yeah. But that one, why not? I mean, I want to see that. This is the outlier times 2, right? Don't give up if this is what you love. You know, one of the things I was thinking about saying at the beginning of this thing is, we don't even know why we love this stuff, but we do. And so what are you going to tell the guy with one eye who's colorblind? If that's you, Jocko, I mean, don't even think about stopping. I mean, there's magic to be had, and there are places for this. And I'm talking about there are places. I'm talking about this as an art form, you know. And sculpture, of course, is something else that is like made to order for the colorblind guy. Anyway, but yeah, you didn't ask about that. So I wanted to make sure you got a chance to see again a couple starts by the Boston School guys. So I'm showing you these 2 by Tarbell, where you can actually see canvases that were probably covered in that one or maybe the second day. And this again, Liz, is giving you an idea of, you know, and by the way, look at these things with the idea in mind of saying, what did he make sure he got and what did he get later? So he still had some time left over. So you're seeing things like activity, say, busy little activity in here. He didn't get that in the first 2 hours. He didn't need that, but he really nailed the location of this and this here. Do you follow my hand? And this right here, and this over here, and certain points, right? And certain exits, certain light effects, right? And these light effects are beautiful in relation to each other. So there's so much work to do, right? But no, in the beginning, he would have had just some kind of a movement between the value over here and the value over there. He would have lost this into this. He would have changed the color, but he wouldn't have drawn that back of her dress in an early way. He would have drawn this early, relatively early. So when you start seeing things that look like, even these guys down here, you know, those don't look like anything except an indication that something's going to come there, do they? So he may have just been asking, and then one of the big questions you are asking in that first 2 hours you're sitting there, you're saying, is this complete enough for me to say, yes, this is going to be a good painting. This is going to be worth finishing. You want me to repeat that the reason I decided I had to do a start and have it in the first, know what it was going to be in that first day, because when I was working with Gamble, the way we worked, I couldn't tell. I was 30 days into a portrait with Gamble, and I still didn't know if it was going to be a success. These guys know right there in these things, which you can see plainly are not 14-hour paintings. Well, you can see if you're living through my eyes, but you can see that they already know that their composition is already there, the color scheme is already there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so, and by the way, when we talk about all the big things that have to be right, the color scheme is one of those big things that have to be right. But the composition is the biggest thing that has to be well in hand. By the end of the day, that's why it's so important about these exits and the location of your, say, your center of interest mass, you know. Those things are huge from the point of view of anchoring the composition. So, did I finish answering that question? Was there more to that, Mr. Producer?
Yeah, that was it.
That was it, good.
He's not either. He's neither.
He's neither? Oh, I'm pleased. I did have a student, and he's listening to us right now, aren't you, Agam? I think you said that you had to make compensations for color stuff, and there's apparently some classes and things out there that really, really help. So I don't know anything about that and how much that would affect what we do. But and again, I'm being informed by my producer. I'm looking the wrong way again. You know, if nothing came out of this tonight except this one idea, it's such a huge one for the. For everybody who works with me and who works in this way, and that is that question of how do you cover the canvas. And there's so many of these things where you can see how you might do it. And there's 2 sergeants on the left here and this Tarbell on the right. But again, you can see the orientation around maintaining the unity of major masses. And that would apply, obviously, Sargent's talking about 3 big values. Yeah, so my producers reminded me, and I don't even know where we are, Mr. Producer. How are we doing in time here? I've been long-winded, I think.
We're a little over an hour. You can go longer if you want.
If you guys are out there are interested, I'm going to go longer until our numbers dwindle down because I really feel like we barely started doing this. I don't want to do too much so that you don't want to do it twice. You know, they tell you to keep your audience hungry. I'm not thoroughly that guy. You're hungry enough the way it is. So if you have more questions, why don't you keep them coming? So we're at an hour now. I don't have a clock in front of me, so I can't read that. A little more than an hour. So why don't I just say I'll go for another 20 minutes or so, folks. I'm going to go through these pictures. I'm just going to go through them slowly, and I'm going to stop. I'm showing you a start and a finish of several of these people. This is a start and a finish by, I say this is a start. Now, you can call this a study, but our studies are the same thing as our starts. And here's a finish. And so you can see that this process lends itself really well to as far as you want to go and finish. There's nothing about stopping you from actually putting leaves on trees, shall we say, or more folds in the drapery, or working more, executing more detail in any which place, as you can see. So, and you see all the folds in here, they're developed more. So I'm going to go to a couple more like that. Well, let me show you these. Here's this one I'm showing you. Somebody asked me about this. I posted this recently on Instagram, but this is the start that you all watched me do, or you saw me do. I can't remember what I showed you on this one, but you might have seen steps for this thing. But you can see what this is. This is that coverage in the one day. And again, if you can see that without, if you don't look hard at this, if you keep your eyes sort of fuzzed out, you can see that the basic content is there to tell whether the composition is working, which is really the most huge element. And then once you get that composition working, the rest of it is execution. As Gamble would say, it's child's play. Once you're skilled, once you're trained, the rest of it is just making sure you don't leave home, which means don't leave your big story. Don't leave what brought you to the game or what's making the big game while you go for the little I's and O's and all these other things. By the way, in some cases, not so much in this case, but in some cases, the busyness of this area has to be in the start, so you don't get to leave and not put the I's and O's in. But if you're going to fail to cover the canvas, and enough so you can see whether you have a great composition, it's better to fail by having this be a really good egg in the right color than it is to have all the pieces in it. So I'm hoping this engenders some questions. So these are just two fine finished paintings by Tarbell and De Camp down below, Tarbell above. And so this is a start by Paxton. And you've seen this before, and this is one of the worked up finishes that is very typical of his execution. But again, is there any difficulty of adding all sorts of pleats and things and drawing up his stuff in major masses? The answer is, of course, there really isn't. In a major light mass, it's particularly easy to make parts darker. But in dark, or these masses here, what we do is we paint what we call a general tonality. So it may be slightly busy, green and blue or whatever, but you're not in there trying to find every little fold. He will do that more than some others. And by the way, this one I believe was in the second day of work, if not the third, because I can see areas where he's painted wet over dry. So so there might be some other execution that that you wouldn't expect to see in the start. But in any case, it's not a difficult thing to actually make this into a highly studied head. You see how beautifully these heads are studied. And he will. That's exactly what he'll do. But he's after essentials right now. The things, literally, he's thinking the same thing the other guys are thinking about, where these strong players are. Are they in the right place, making their exits, setting up things? You know, this whole area is lost. Can you paint this? Can you see this as one value, more or less, right through here? And leave it alone and just put your time in here? Put your time in important places like this. Can you do that? Can you discipline yourself to do that? That's the key to our way of working. And then find the ways of unifying these major masses, which is what Liz really got me onto that one. So here I'm showing you a demonstration I did, and then this one here, by the way, the painting has about that much more to it, and I don't know how I wound up with it, only a cropped version of this. I've never been much good at taking photographs of my paintings, but this is I may as well think of it as my attic series. But I think I called this one Lost and Found. This is Old Hat, and et cetera. But this one shows you exactly what I'm working on, and you could tell I'm not working on. There's a bunch of busyness in here, which is chairs and stuff like that. And so because it's a demonstration, you literally have to limit yourself to an hour and a half. I don't know if I went 2 hours, but it might have been. But you can't organize every single little chair in there. You just have to organize the exits, the major placements. You have to get the effects right, so all the major effects are in there and working. All the big colors are there, so this is the color scheme of the thing. It was done in a gallery of the Guild in Boston. But that just shows you that's how I start every painting. And eventually, I think my producer is going to break out with that with the GBA painting of the Violinist, and we'll give you and we'll be able to show you how it works right from the beginning and how I work through till I get to that kind of an execution, that kind of a finish, without any losses because of the approach we take. Okay. So I'm just showing you kinds of finish you can get. I'm not trying to do more than that with this. And this one gets back to that whole idea again. If we have any questions, we probably should throw them at me.
I'm going to be skipping a lot of them because there's a lot coming in.
Okay.
I have one.
I'm just told that we are going to have to skip some of your really good questions, but they'll probably be fodder either for the next one of these or for one of my videos. So don't stop them from coming in.
Question, another from Jocko is, did you memorize
That's an interesting one. So did you memorize portraits is what he asked. Did I do it from memory? And the answer to that is I did memory of everything. I should do a good, I don't know if I've done it. Have I done a video on the memory drawings I've done? But I memorized my own work after the fact. It was never very good. That's one of those areas where I felt like complete failure. It's the most difficult thing. But on the other hand, I definitely have done all kinds of them from life, and I'll show you those if I haven't, from models standing in front of me. At one point, we had a model stand for 10 minutes. Other times, 1 minute, and some of those drawings are surprising. They're surprising even to me today. But but I tried to do that, and I keep trying to do it because what it does is it makes you have to learn your sitter. It makes you have to learn the sitter, and yet it's not the most efficient way to work yet. I mean, I never found it to be ultimately the most efficient way to do this. And there are reasons, all kinds of reasons for it. Some of it is you get locked into the realism, and you don't get a chance to actually go with the flow about the composition and things like that. But I can't get into much more of that. I have definitely done that. Give me another one. Actually, let's stay focused on their question, so I don't have to worry. By the way, this guy who's asking about the spots, these pictures, these colors are pretty much the same in these. So it's just too bad that this doesn't work out. And I've done this before with you all, so I don't need to do much with this. But I'm just making sure you understand that I'm hitting color notes and comparing them, and getting a color scheme. So all these colors were trying to be out there, so I could see what it was going to take. And so the values are wrong in this. These are early photographs. Now, sometimes in the background, and this is one of those places where I'm saying you might have stuff in the background, but you don't have to make everything. You just have to note that it's got some level of busyness. And that's some of what's happening down here, too, as part of this broad lay-in thing. But I'm a big fan of the loose, the open brush mark look in the beginning. And even in a more finished area, you can see that there are big strokes like horizontally across here, which I just get it. I'm always tickled by when I see things rather like that in people like Jerome, who it does show up in as well. Let's see what other.
Tristan one there in the middle.
Oh, Tristan, hi, there you are. And Norma, hi, nice to see you. Good comments. Haven't ever heard you mention Russian painters like Repin. From both his art and accounts by students, he really pursued ideas of color, spots, visual impression. No, the only reason I haven't is because I think of it as an imaginative painter, and I've never been particularly attracted to him. So, you got to understand that I just follow my own nose. It doesn't mean I think he's bad. I've always admired his work, but I've never found it to be a source for me. And everybody has to follow the ones that they find are going to deliver, or sometimes it's just a coincidence of who you found first, right? But no, I've always admired that Repin stuff. I mean, Repin is a really exciting painter. And it'd be nice to know more about what he's said. I don't know any of his quotes either. So don't take me wrong about any of that stuff. I really don't mean to it's less fault and more default caused by my lack of engagement with as many people as that. Yeah, it's funny. When we talk about your own body of knowledge and your own background, you got to take that into consideration. There's a certain point where you're sort of saturated with the stuff you found yourself with enough things that you're gonna that have been enabling you, and you're getting there, and all of a sudden you're not much looking that way anymore. That's a student's job, and you really. There's a funny way. What did somebody say? First you'll see too much color, and then you won't see enough. First you won't see enough color, and then you'll see too much. That's when students settle in and they try to paint one way, and they settle in too soon. So when you're young, the idea is to keep looking around, and we all try to absorb widely. And these days, you can really absorb widely. And so some of it, in my day, might have been the availability of books even, although they would show up eventually. But as you get further along, there's a coalescing. Things fall away, and you begin to be narrower and narrower because you're now beginning to be more you, and it's all working. So you have enough. So that's why you don't have to be this perfect painter. You just have enough of the body of information. It's available from many different sources. So you don't have to be building on the same people as I do. But you do have to maintain your own sense of what makes a good painting, and only chase down good stuff. Don't follow the wind, because there's just too many winds. So yeah, that's a fascinating one. But no, I've loved Repin. If you send me a shot or two of his and talk to me about it, and maybe even send me a couple quotes with them, I'd love to put them on a video, as I have with some other people that I admire far less. I shouldn't say far less. I don't much put people on it I don't admire. Is there another one, Mr. Producer? I know that we're going past a number of questions. I'm hoping we can at least get to all the ones that are really pragmatic, in the how to paint sort of mindset. So I didn't mean to just leave this here. I was showing back and forth. I was wanting to go back and forth between this is the outline mode of the academic. So there are lines for the stuff that he's going to put in the background here. This is Jerome. And so you can see how much attention is to the drawing and how much less to the color. So it's basically a solid mass of color, one color thing. And by the way, even an impressionist would do that up to a point, but if there's a great movement in the color, we'd chase that. So you can see that the figure here is gold going to red, right? It's still essentially one color, but it's not quite, right? But you can also see that what we're interested in is the entire ensemble and how it's being affected by this. And when you're doing imaginative paintings, you can't necessarily do this. Nowhere near as easy to do that. I think we have one more question. Maybe we have time for a couple more. I'm going to have my, this has been a lot of fun for me. I feel like, I better take a drink. Oh, Rodrigo, great. Hi, Paul, do you always mix oil with your white? Yeah, to the same consistency for all the different layers as you bring out the resolution. Yeah, I never change that. And I can't even tell you if I have a great reason beyond that, except I never find that I need to. I find it just works great. I think some of it might be, I wouldn't call it comfort zone as much as what you get used to being effective with. If I wasn't being effective, believe me, I would change it. But I don't glaze. I wouldn't say I don't make an effort to glaze, but I paint solidly. So the first thing I do if I'm going to change a color toward the end is I match the color solidly there. Say that if I'm going to adjust a dark, and I match the light solidly, and I mask it out into the dark and come back and make that color again with the light and come back again with that one and draw with the dark and come back and draw with the dark and get that. But I need that liquidity again because I recreate the edge every time. So yeah, no, I've never found a value in that. There's sort of a halfway place between glazing, but it is a kind of a discipline to be a straight up opaque painter. And I like that about Ang, and you can see it in, now some of his work looks like it's got glaze. Some of it, and he says, paint opaquely. So I don't know what he thought opaque was. Maybe it was thinner than my opaque. But, or maybe it was a different time in his evolution that he said that thing. But that paint opaquely thing is really what we think. That's the way we think. The transparency, there's something, all of our paints have a certain amount of that, some less than others, like a green, any of the colors that, even like alizarin, they have white in, they become less transparent immediately. So almost, probably the most translucent is going to be alizarin itself. And then there are certain other colors that have a certain different levels of that. But the easiest thing to do is lose it. The hardest thing to do is make all of them transparent without using funny mediums. So I just find that it's much better to stick with the basic idea of opacity, keep your colors opaque without going out of your way. I basically let nature lead, So if a color is doing something right, I don't ask myself whether it's translucent or not. I just say, thank you very much. And if I don't get it back when I change the value and get lighter, and it's not feeling like nature, I find another way to do it. But yeah, that's the answer to that question. Good one. Any value to painting? Yeah, more than one painting at a time. There's always value in painting multiple paintings. They inform each other, but especially if you're painting impressionist things. But there's also a value to finishing paintings, and not just being out there doing lots of paintings and having them all half finished, because one finished painting is going to inform the next 20. And and yet at the same time, I'm always, when a new painting comes up, a new problem. And I've found that way you're solving a problem in one might be what you needed in the one before it, or the one that you're also working on. I can't say it more than that, but I've never found that. By the way, life doesn't let you really just sit there and work on one painting. Some of it's the drying time problem, classic, the way I work. I expect the painting to be dry. I paint my lay-ins on Fridays. I expect them to be dry on Monday so I can start fresh into it. So what am I going to do? There's 2 days off, right? And it happens anytime if I wind up. But I just say that because I love to have it to be forced to be 2 days. I like to take 2 days off.
To go down to maybe end with that one.
Okay, Paul. Yeah. Alfred Munnings had one eye. Now I did hear that. That's a good point, Jack. Yeah, I completely forgot that. He wasn't colorblind. Oh boy, there's some really good questions here. I'm told we have time for one more, but boy, I want to talk about all these. I'm afraid some of you guys like Cole. Those are really good questions. I really want to talk about. I'm gonna pick some of these up. At what point do you consider the hierarchy of edges of the full picture? Right from the start is the answer to that. But I want to pick that up as a video. Who was it by? Agam. We have one by Agam.
Yeah, at the bottom.
Right at the bottom.
Near the bottom.
Okay, Agam. Brushes. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Brushes.
Next one.
Oh. Oh, there, I'm sorry. I once heard, start with a broom, end with a toothpick. Any comment? Do you ever work with a fan brush? I don't paint with a fan brush. I use fan brushes for reducing ridges and things like that. But I find that almost anything will do the same thing, so I don't much even use a fan brush. I don't paint for those kinds of effects, but I don't fault people who do. I really like that when that happens, not to be tricky, but when it is more effective at bringing your painting idea out. So, but yeah, the idea of starting with a big brush, these paintings, these lay-ins can't be really effectively done with a little brush. But I think more than whether you work a big brush or a little brush is whether you have a big mind or a little mind, right? You start with a little mind. I don't care what size your brain is. If you could use a big brush and have too little a mind. But you can have a little brush, and I'm talking now about people like Metcalf, the American Metcalf. Look at his paintings. He uses a little brush. I mean, when I was a student, we'd be using like these little twos, bristles. And how in the heck do you cover a canvas up with bristles? So we're moving up to fours. And finally we could read somewhere, as you have, maybe Sargent or somebody, saying use the biggest brush you can and when you lay the picture in. And, most of his pictures were pretty big, so a big brush, around this up to the 12s, the 10s, those are brushes that are still not looking very big on that size of a canvas. I've laid brushes in I buy brushes at the store sometimes. If I have a big painting, I buy like an inch and a half brushes for house painting. And there's some really beautiful ones. And I will sometimes lay them in with that to cover a really big area. But no, the mentality is what matters. Not whether you use a big or small brush. So I don't have a religion about that. Some people do. I do have a basic idea, though, and that is that in one sense, it doesn't matter how big the brush is if you understand you're only painting with one edge. You're only articulating the effect of one edge, right? But then a brush can get too big, and especially as you get further into a picture, that's where his point would be well taken, that the further you get in, the more damage you'll do with a big fat brush, obviously. So we go from the greater to the lesser, from the majors to the minors, and all that stuff is a big brush to small brush kind of a thing that tends to happen. Even finer brushes tend to happen. Well, I'm told, guys, that we are at the end of this thing. Man, this has been a lot of fun. I wonder what we got to as far as numbers go. What was our final high, guys? We're up to 50 people plus.
I think we were up close to 70 at one point.
Oh, wow. Okay, that was really nice. We were up to 70. This has really been good. I want to get feedback from you all, so anything you can say by way of email or anything about it for us to improve this, for us to be able to do it better. Also want you to, if you don't mind, this has been done live, and this is a lot of time for my producer, and in general, probably is going to start requiring dollars. So if anybody wants to make further donations just to the cause, that would really be great. But in the meantime, yeah, keep painting, and let's plan to do this again, okay? And I don't know how far out, but let's plan to do this again, and we'll try to, my producer and I will be working on trying to do it more effectively. I have a lot of paintings here that I didn't go through, so I would really like to. What I want to do is just remind you again that what I'm trying to do is talk about the way I paint, the way I found, really heavily influenced by the Boston School and visual order thinking that's just across the board. I'd say all of painting, all the art world actually moved over to what I call best practices. And the reason I'm here isn't because I admired these people as much as I found there greater benefits. And getting the thing I was trying to do from the beginning was just the most of the best of the truth. And then at the end, like Benson said, being able to manipulate the composition right from the beginning to the end and enjoy that process. As a person who's painting an impressionist painting, again, remember that's what we're talking about, painting, not broken color, lousy drawing and painting, but painting the visual impression in front of you. And so I've been told to, what's that? I've been told we're out of here. So thank you all very much. Let's do it again. All right? The best wishes in all your work.